Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. Now, before we get into this episode, a quick note that we will be recording and releasing 2 movie verdicts episodes very, very soon. First, Robert Callahan and I will be joined by my wife, Adrienne Hare, to dive into Legally Blonde, and we do plan to release that this week, so keep an eye out for that. Then, in sort of a not quite movie verdicts episode, but more in line with that, my best friend from 3rd grade, in each other's weddings, best men in each other's weddings. He is a partner at Seed IP law firm in Seattle. Bobby Saltani will join me in a special episode with a working title of Jackie Chiles et al., where we break down the best of law and lawyers in the best sitcom of all time, of course, Seinfeld. So we're going to be doing that here very soon. So keep an eye out in your feed for both of those episodes. Finally, if you could use someone to talk to during this time about career issues, the current legal market, how COVID is impacting lateral hires, anything like that, please go to varsitysearch.com and you could book a time right into my calendar. You can visit with me. I'm happy to share any insights that I might have or answer your questions. So don't hesitate to do that. Look forward to visiting with you. Okay, today's guest is Ryan Reed. Ryan is a partner at the San Antonio law firm Pulman, Cappuccio Pullen, where he maintains a robust litigation practice that increasingly involves matters of probate, wills, and trusts. Ryan and I actually sat next to each other in Baylor Law's infamous practice court program. So I know him as both a tremendous lawyer and a great person, and so you are in for a treat here over these next 30 to 40 minutes. He's got some great stuff to share. Now, we did record this conversation in early March, just prior to the COVID outbreak. I think this might be the last episode like this that we recorded prior to COVID. But as we have in the last few weeks, Ryan graciously came back and shared a little more with us about how his firm's been impacted and how they've adapted. That segment is at the conclusion of the interview, so stick around for the COVID conversation at the end of the episode. All right, with that, let's get into our conversation with San Antonio lawyer Ryan Reed on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Ryan Reed joins us now, and down in San Antonio. Ryan, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Well, let's start off by learning a little bit about your firm and your practice specifically. So why don't you tell us and the audience a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So my firm is called Pullman, Cappuccio Pullen. We are one of the mid-sized firms in San Antonio, and there's probably between 10 and 20 mid-sized firms in San Antonio. We have a heavy litigation background, although we do have transactional partners. And my practice is focused mostly on business and probate litigation, although I do a fair amount of work advising businesses and handling probate matters as well.
Yeah, you'd mentioned the last time I was down there and we got together, you had mentioned that a larger part of your docket and your work had been in that probate area. What do you attribute that to? What have you seen, or what's going on to kind of drive that?
You know, it was actually an area of the law that I was interested in law school, but I never really knew how to make a living doing it. And as time has gone by and more folks have looked to me for probate help and I've learned how to do it, I've just taken it on as more a piece of my practice because it, you know, while you're dealing with death, it is a reasonably pleasant aspect of the practice. and it also leads to probate litigation. And you've got to know how to do the probate in order to do the probate litigation.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything going on in just the probate law world in terms of changes to the laws or things that the clients that come to you are dealing with that are maybe novel or unique, or kind of what's going on in the practice area?
I don't know that there's anything novel or unique. The biggest issue that I've encountered is as the tax laws have changed and the exemption amounts have gone up, over the years, folks who haven't redone their wills end up with tax plan wills that really aren't necessary. And so that creates some unusual situations. But aside from that, I think the probate and the probate litigation world remains largely the same, because what inevitably happens is there's always a sibling, there's always a stepchild or a stepmother where the relationship just isn't as strong as it should be, which leads to some hurt feelings, which can very easily lead to legal disputes.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to ask you about San Antonio, just in terms of as a place to practice, obviously a place to live as well, just for those listening maybe that are outside the area, thinking about looking for a place to move to or anything like that. What can you tell us about just the practice of law in San Antonio and what that's like?
I absolutely love practicing law in San Antonio and really enjoy living here. It's been a great move for my family and I. It is unique. It's different from the other metropolitan areas in Texas. But on the whole, the lawyers who practice here have a much better attitude about being professional and working together. And so it's not quite as cutthroat as other places where we occasionally have cases. And so I really enjoy that aspect of the practice. But it does have its peculiarities. In Houston and Dallas and Austin, there's a lot of mid-sized businesses which feed a lot of law firms. And in San Antonio, we really don't have that same type of business. Not to say there aren't, mid-sized business firms, but there's just fewer of them, and they are controlled by the matriarch or the patriarch of the family, as opposed to a board of directors like you might see in other major metropolitan areas.
Right. And then have you noticed, or does it make a difference in terms of your practice, in terms of just the kind of blending together almost, or erasing of the border maybe between Austin and San Antonio, and just how those two areas have almost combined? And I see a lot of firms and lawyers essentially claiming kind of they practice in Austin and San Antonio almost simultaneously. And that seems to be more of a thing in the last handful of years.
I don't see it as much on the ground as I expected that I would, although there are lawyers who certainly say that. I think it really does come down to, most lawyers have a judge or a set of judges that they know and that they're used to. And so if you're a San Antonio lawyer, you're going to know those judges better. If you're an Austin lawyer, you're going to know those judges better. Not to say that you can't do both, but I suspect that you're going to have a preference for one or the other, but you're happy to go to the other town when you do. So it is. And everything in between, Hays County is a big area of development. And so there's going to be a whole new set of lawyers who are going to towns like that and opening practices and really staying busy with just the work from, for instance, Hays County.
Right. Well, I want to ask you about when you think about your early years in practice. I know it wasn't that long ago, but what is something that you learned or something that stands out to you that you learned during those first few years that has stuck with you and has become a key component of who you are as a lawyer today and going forward?
I think there's two things. The first is don't be afraid to pleasantly go into the courthouse and ask for help. If you go into all the courthouses that you work in and you treat the clerks and the staff respectfully and politely, and do the same with the judges, they will remember you and they will treat you well throughout your career and help you when you're looking for help. And then the other thing that I learned early on was whenever you prepare something, you should always prepare it as if you were putting your name on it and sending it out into the world, as opposed to just preparing it as if it were a draft for somebody else to review or finalize.
Yeah. Let's talk more about that, because I've heard kind of different variations on that, but around the same theme, that a lot of times young associates will draft something like a draft is the best way to say it. And then maybe present it to their supervising attorney, partner, whoever, as sort of, well, this is what I think, or can you review this, or what edits are there? And you're saying that that's the wrong way to approach it.
I think that's accurate. There's no doubt that as a young lawyer, a partner is going to edit your work and change your work. But if they don't have everything in front of them, they're going to be much more frustrated when they are trying to edit that work or change that work. And so I had a partner that I worked for as a young lawyer, and I would go to him and I'd say, we haven't talked to the client. I don't know what the facts are here. And his response was, we'll make them up, and then we'll see if the client says that's correct or not. I don't always agree with that, but I do think the concept, has some merit. Here is what we believe happened. Client, please tell us. And then if you, in essence, write a letter with that information highlighted so that everybody knows, hey, this needs to be vetted, it's much easier to go to the client and say, okay, this is what I need to complete. This is what I think, but you tell me exactly what happened. And so as opposed to just having a big blank, if you have something of what you believe happened there, it makes it a lot easier to, write the letter. And so a lot of the times I see draft letters given to partners, and for instance, they're not fully formatted. They're not justified. The date's not right. And it could be that the partner says, I was ready to sign that letter and send it out, but, you didn't have it in a format ready for me to go, and then there's an extra step. So, my advice is, if you have things as ready to go as you possibly can, and you're anticipating that it will be sent out into the world, you're going to gain a lot of traction and a lot of respect from your peers.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to say it, that if it's something that they can just sign and send out, or sign and file, or whatever, if it's needing no edits at all, that's what ideally you want to be submitting, right?
That's correct.
Is there anything that you learned more recently, or maybe later in practice, that you wish you had known as a young lawyer?
That's a good question. I don't know, but what I could say is I look at it now from the perspective of, I'm a partner with a law firm. I'm busy. I'm constantly on the go, and so now I know what partners are dealing with. I now know what makes somebody's life easier when they're on the go. And as an associate, it's very easy to say, well, that guy's leaving to go play golf, or that guy's never here, but you have no idea that guy is on the phone from the moment he walks out of the office to wherever he's going. He's on the phone before dinner or after dinner, and you just don't have a good appreciation for what it means to be running from place to place, to go meet with people, to go talk to judges, or what have you. And so having lived that life, I now know what it's like if the written product that has to be filed is done, and it's done in a quality manner where I can say, it's good enough. Let's get it filed. And there's somebody there to say, all right, I'm going to take it and we're going to get it filed, as opposed to waiting around for instructions on what do I do next, or, how do we do this? I think what I've learned is the best associate is the one who takes the initiative and says, here's how we're going to get it done. All I need you to is review and approve.
Yeah. And I think there's also something to what you said about just from maybe an attitude or a mindset of young associates in terms of how they view the partners that they're working for? I mean, I would imagine it's an entirely different thing to, as an associate, be working under the maybe false presumption that the partner is, just relaxing and playing golf and not working all those different, segments of time that you're talking about, versus just having the assumption that they are doing all of that and working like crazy as a partner, just at different ways and different times and different things. That as an associate, having the assumption that that's what's happening can drastically change the way you would think about your own work or approach it, and just your relationships with partners and all of that. So just kind of thinking about what an attitude or mindset an associate ought to have related to what their partner is doing is an interesting thing to think about.
It really is. And I have, for a number of reasons, lately kind of undertaken to figure out what are the aspects of what a lawyer does. Because I think that particularly in civil litigation, there are so many components that a lawyer is expected to do well, but it can be very difficult to have all of those skill sets. So for instance, first, a lawyer, a partner in a law firm, they have an obligation to generate business, right? So they have to maintain relationships with clients. They have to build themselves in the community as a professional with knowledge of an area or an ability to generate business. So first you've got to have the knowledge. And then second, you've got to have the personality to generate the business. And you've got to be the person that people want to come to help. So you've got that whole component of it. How do you make that happen? Then you've got the component of how do I, in fact, do the work in a competent manner? And a lot of the times that work means research, writing, preparing pleadings, organizing information. But that work also involves, presenting in court and presenting at meetings. And so there's a lot of different components to what a lawyer has to do well. They have to be personable, they have to be knowledgeable, they have to be a good presenter and advocate, and they have to have a strong written ability to communicate in writing. And not all of those things, nobody's blessed with all of those things, or very few people are. And even if you are, you don't have the time in the day to do it all. So that's why you really have to look at the team mentality and think about, where do I fit in on this team? Where do I add value? Maybe my role changes over time, but how do I take one of those areas and add value and not be jealous that, because a lot of lawyers do it. They want to be the guy that goes into court, and as a young lawyer, that's not your primary role. You go along, you see how it's done, but your job isn't just to sit around and market. Your job isn't to sit around and wait for the next court hearing. Your job is to get the work done and demonstrate a knowledge of that case so that you can help the team. And I think as lawyers, we forget about the team approach many times, but that's something I'd really like to see, and I really think will develop in the future based on the generations that are practicing now. And so I think if young lawyers think about that and say, what component of this can I contribute to so I can be a valuable member of the team, that's a recipe for success. Yeah,
absolutely. That's really good. I want to transition to when your firm is going through the process of hiring associates, and in particular, maybe folks that have been out for a couple of years and they're possible lateral type hires. What are some of the things that are important for you when you're kind of, I guess, starting with on whether it's a resume, cover letter, you're just looking kind of at documents. What are some of the things that are important in those and when you're going through the process?
What I have found, and this is particularly in the line of work that we do, we're not a big firm, and so we're not looking at grades and credentials so much as we are looking at, is this a person who's competent and who we want to work with? And so there's two things that I'm looking for when I'm looking at a resume of a lateral. The first thing I'm looking for is, do they have some experience that might lend itself to what we do? And have they done that in a fashion that I think or worked with folks that we think are competent or have a reputation for being competent? And then secondarily, I'm looking for, do they have a personality? Because I want to like the people that I work with. And so I like to see something shine through on the resume that convinces me that they're not just, um, there to be a lawyer, so to speak, but they're there to be a human being that is in the business of being a lawyer to help others. So, those are the components that I'm looking for.
So to that end, in terms of trying to, because I mean, we hear often about, finding people with a good personality or a personality that jives with maybe the rest of the lawyers. But it's interesting that you mention it in terms of, usually when I'm having that conversation, it's in the context of that's what the interview's for. And I'm sure you would use the interview for that as well. But it's interesting that you mentioned specifically on the resume that it's something that you look for there as well. Does that come from looking at outside interests or things that they put on there that, what is it that you would see on a resume that would maybe point towards a type of personality that is interesting for you?
Yeah, I think normally it comes from, outside interests or, skills. You might see something about something that they've done in college or an experience that they've had that was, right, it wasn't a traditional experience that you would think of. They actually went out and did something different, worked for a nonprofit or did something along the lines that's not just worked here, went to school here, and here.
Got it.
Something that shows that they've got outside interests and that they're not just all consumed with, I want to be a lawyer.
And then when you do get to the point of conducting an interview with someone, what are a couple of the things that you're wanting to see? What are maybe a couple of things that are red flags or trouble spots?
Well, I'll tell you, my biggest pet peeve in an interview is when you ask somebody what it is they're interested in, and they give you something of a canned response, and you go on to describe what your practice is about, and they say, that's exactly it. That's what I want to do.
Right.
It's a red flag because you don't really have a clue what you're talking about. And,
right.
and for a baby lawyer, that's fair. For a lawyer fresh out of law school, it's fair for you not to know, but you should be able to articulate what you liked in law school and what you think you might like, in the future. Would you like to be the person who is in court fighting for a client? Would you like to be the person who is, traveling around taking depositions? Would you like to be a person who's sitting in an office preparing briefs and motions? Would you like to be doing transactional work? Would you be like to negotiate deals? Would you like to prepare contracts? You probably have some sense of what it is you're interested in. And so that's what I'm looking to kind of pull back when I talk to young lawyers and to laterals in the hiring process is, what is it about this practice that you enjoy and where might you fit into the team?
Yeah, that's good. I meant to ask you this a second ago, but on resumes, cover letters, do you have pet peeves or red flags there too?
Yeah, if there are issues where it doesn't look professional, that's going to be the number one red flag. When I file a brief, I want it to be spaced appropriately. I want it to be justified. I want it to look professional. It's not wrong if you don't justify with a brief. Some courts have local rules, some don't. But when I see a document and it's got extra spacing on it, or it has something misspelled, and granted, we all misspell things. We all have typos. It happens. But if it's something you've gone over multiple times and you're submitting to multiple people, a resume should be visually appealing. If it's not visually appealing, then you're immediately looking for errors and you're ready to scrutinize it. And if something is misspelled correctly, or misspelled rather, then you're going to be much more inclined to think this person is sloppy because this is their own resume and they couldn't even make sure it was done perfectly.
Yeah, no, that's fair. You referenced this a little bit earlier in talking about kind of the role that a partner has, or one of the roles that a partner has. How would you advise young lawyers to start thinking about building their own client base, building their own business?
So there have been two things that have worked well for me in that regard. The first is just the way I interacted with lawyers. Over the years, I had the opportunity to interact with a lot of lawyers on a lot of different cases, and I'd always treat them respectfully. I would always give them, the courtesies that they needed, and I think that pays dividends, because now I have a lot of lawyers that I worked with as young lawyers referring cases to me. I'm representing lawyers who I worked with as young lawyers because they come back and they say, that guy was professional. He cared about me. And he's just a reasonable lawyer. So I think that is one big component of it. I thought of a third point, and I'll jump to that third point, and that is, when you talk to a potential client, if you give them the time of day, the more people you help out, the bigger your network's going to be. And I have a lot of clients who are referrals from referrals from referrals, and I've forgotten who the original referral was. Right. But, I helped somebody out. Maybe I didn't actually do any work for them, but I gave them half an hour of my time and talked to them about the problem and suggested where they go. And, sure enough, I'll hear back from them again in the future, or somebody will tell them, hey, so-and-so said you helped them out, and then end up with a great case. And I will tell you, I've got one right now that is going to be a career case for me. Wow. It's going to be a huge, huge case. And the reason I have it is because somebody was referred to one of my colleagues. She asked if I could help. I gave them the time of day. I ended up taking their case on, helped them out on a small case. And they ultimately became the referral source for what is going to be a huge case for me. And so, wow. If you overlook small cases too often, if you don't give people the time of day, they're not going to come back to you. And finally, and that kind of blends into the third component of it, is, it's the age-old adage, you have to be involved in the community. A lot of my business comes from being involved with the parental community of the kids in my school. And that is being on the board of the community center, and just being involved in the community and knowing people who are in that community. And the way I bill myself to those people is I'm a problem solver. I'm a lawyer and I'm a problem solver. If you've got a legal problem, I will get you to the right place if I can't help you out. And I have partners who are experts in particular areas, and sometimes they bemoan the fact that, their phone doesn't ring the same. Now, when they get a case, it might be a several $100,000 case, but it's not all the time happening for them. And I just have the volume of work. And that means that at times there will be bigger cases and at times there will be smaller cases. But everybody has to find their way. What's worked for me is being the problem solver.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like you said, being willing to, kind of be available for someone regardless of what their legal problem is, in the sense that maybe you can help them, but just as often maybe you specifically can't, but it's directing them to maybe another colleague in your firm, maybe even to another firm if it's a very specific type of thing that you don't do. But just becoming known, like you said, you're branding yourself as the problem solver. And at the end of the day, it may be another lawyer or even another firm that serves that potential client on that one particular matter, but you're still going to have that reputation with them as someone that helped them, right?
That's exactly right.
Well, I know you talked about being involved, I guess, in your around the parents of your kids and the schools and all of that, and that leads to a question that's a kind of hot topic in the legal world, which is just how to, especially with working with young lawyers, dealing with the issue of personal life and work life and how to make that work together, whether it's work-life balance, work-life harmony, or some other new phrase that we'll come up with in the next 10 years to talk about this. What have you seen for you personally, and how to kind of make those things all work together? And then how also as a firm are you, talking about it or working on that issue with younger lawyers?
I wouldn't say that we have made a conscious dedication to doing something about it, but it is certainly in the periphery because a number of us at my firm, have children who we want to spend time with. And so the unfortunate truth is, as a young associate, you're just going to have to put in more time and more hours. But we're all cognizant of the fact that we all want to spend time with our families. So we have a lot of associates who are, who don't have children yet, and they end up putting in more hours, but they're also still learning.
Right.
I think what it comes down to is everybody's got to make their own decision, and there's a trade-off. And the trade-off is between how much money do you want to make and how much time do you want to spend with your family. And from where I am today, I can tell you, you can make a very healthy living if you do this right and still spend a lot of time, with your family and having that balance. I'll tell you, a big key to my success is my office is 1.5 miles from my house, and my kid's school is in the middle of that. And so it makes it for a very convenient, drop off, pick up, need to run back to the house. And in fact, I met the pest control guy at the house earlier this morning to let him in and to spray, and was back to the office for my next meeting. And so, you've got to factor in location and whatnot. But I think on the whole, the profession is leaning more that direction. You have to set your own limitations, but you have to do it, recognizing that clients have demands and clients have needs. And so what works for me is, there's another lawyer here in town who has basically had the talk with his partners, and he says, look, between the hours of 6 and 9, that's my time. I'll do work afterwards, I'll work before then, but I'm going to dedicate that to my family time, and I'm not going to touch my phone during that time. And so there was an upfront conversation there. I am fortunately able to take phone calls from, wherever you are with the cell phone and respond to emails. And so, as long as you are able to communicate effectively, and then you can do that from about wherever you are, then it's just a matter of getting the work done. And that might mean if you're productive in the morning, you dedicate some time in the morning, or if you're productive after the kids go to bed, you do that. But I think if you consider that you can spend as much of your day working as you want, and you just set your limitations on when you're going to work and when you're going to get certain things done, you can be very flexible in this profession. So it really does all come down to, though, how much money you want to make. And so you've always got to keep that consideration in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Life's about trade-offs, right? At the end of the day. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our time. And before we get to our rapid fire questions, I just want to ask if there's anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would want to share with the young lawyers in the audience.
Well, what I would tell the young lawyers in the audience is there's still time to get out of the profession.
We're going to end on a high note.
That's right. It has been good for me, but I will tell you, if you want to be successful, you've got to recognize that this profession is about, service to your fellow man. There are certainly areas of the law that you could go into where you're going to make a lot of money. You might be fighting insurance companies. You might be doing the work of giant companies, and you're a blip on their radar, and you do very well, and you help them out. But the majority of what I do is I deal with people's nearly impossible problems. They call me freaking out because somebody has sued them, because something traumatic has happened. And so that's all I do, is I deal with people's problems. And you have to be careful not to make your clients' problems your own problems, but to give them the time of day and make sure that they're being taken care of. So, that's my advice, is always keep that perspective in mind. Our job is to solve people's problems and help people. And so just remember, it's a profession of service to your fellow man, and keep that in mind when you're doing it. There will be times where you are incredibly frustrated with your clients. You'll be incredibly frustrated with opposing counsel or a judge or what have you. But But then there will come a time when you have gotten somebody meaningful results, and they'll thank you, and it'll make you feel really good. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, I want to say thanks just for you taking the time to be with us. We really appreciate it. We've got a few rapid fire questions to end with. If you're ready to go, I'll shoot these your way.
Okay. I'm ready.
All right. Name one trait or characteristic you most want to see in an associate.
Thorough. I think that's the right word.
Thoroughness. What habit has been key to your success?
I think getting to the office early in the morning and trying to steal an hour focusing on one particular issue.
There you go. Early bird. Favorite app or productivity tool?
I am currently working on designing my own app.
Oh, wow.
And so I suspect that will be my favorite productivity tool. Right. The intention of the app is to, more and more of what we do is via our cell phones. And when I'm going back to try to recount what happened in my day, and I've been running from meeting to meeting and internal office meetings, and I've had phone calls and text messages. And by the way, I give clients my cell phone number, so I get text messages,
sure.
WhatsApps, phone calls, emails.
Right. Do you get TikToks from clients?
I do not. I have not gotten there yet. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen.
Oh, okay. But if they sing their problem to you over a TikTok tune, that'll be a whole new world.
Yeah, that will be. But the intention of the application is to help track all that. Use all of the amazing technology that's available to help track that and create a timesheet for you. And so that will be, when I finally get it fully developed, my favorite app.
Well, you'll have to come back and let us know about that when it is out there and available for other people to benefit from. All right. Favorite legal movie? I'm
going to go with Erin Brockovich.
Wow, nice.
Only because this case that I am working on now, my co-counsel has actually hired Erin Brockovich, the real Erin Brockovich, as a consultant to help with some of the aspects of the case. So, wow, I'm going with that.
That is awesome. Well, in our movie verdicts episodes, we go through these legal movies, and Erin Brockovich is on the list to do, but Erin Brockovich is also the name of a specific award that we give in every single episode. We give the Erin Brockovich Award to the person or to the scene with sort of the best investigative discovery moment. So that works well. That's a good choice.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you again for being with us. Really appreciate you and sharing all the time and all the words.
Dan, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Okay, as I mentioned in the intro, Ryan came back to talk for just a few minutes about how the recent events around COVID-19 have impacted their firm, staff, clients, and all of that. So let's hear what he had to say right now. All right, everybody. Well, Ryan Reed is back with us, as I promised in the intro, to give us a little update since he and I last had our first conversation about how COVID-19 has been impacting him and their firm. So, Ryan, welcome back. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Well, it's great to be back with you. And since we haven't seen each other in a long time, it's really no different. We're just talking to each other like always.
Yeah, exactly. Well, first off, tell us about what has been happening with your practice, with the firm, the staff and attorneys there, and kind of how you all have been adapting to life with COVID-19.
Well, the week that this all started to go down, we started hearing reports of businesses needing to protect their employees, and we actually had several folks who were scheduled for international travel, myself included. And so it became a topic that we were talking about within the firm. And I tried to put together some protocols that mirrored other organizations in the community.
Yeah.
But of course, since we're a small law firm, we never actually sat down and went over it or implemented any of it.
Right.
So I came back to the office on a Friday afternoon and was met with a ton of emails that basically said various things would be shutting down. including schools, which prompted a meeting amongst the partners at about 5 o'clock on what we were going to do the following week, because there were rumors of citywide shutdown orders coming, as well as we knew we had a lot of folks who would probably call in because their children would be home.
Yeah.
So we actually started working on some policies, sent them out to staff on Friday night or Saturday morning, which probably means most of the staff didn't get it. And then by Monday or Tuesday, there were shutdown orders in place in San Antonio, as well as the presidential shutdown of any travel to Europe. So,
right,
I ended up canceling a trip. Several other folks did as well, and then we started this transition to having everybody work from home.
Yeah, and all right, well, and then so you moved everybody to work from home, and since that time, what have the last few weeks like? That was now obviously several weeks ago. What have been the last few weeks like in practicing law and representing clients and trying to get the work of a law firm done from a remote work, almost completely remote work kind of standpoint?
Well, our first big hurdle was access to our documents, and we ended up having to move our document management server to the cloud. So for about 2 weeks, folks were going through something of a painful process of logging in remotely, perhaps downloading documents to a Dropbox type site, and then working on them on their laptops at home. So there was a fair amount of transition in that time. We ultimately got our document server into the cloud, and since then, we've had some hiccups and some learning that we've had to do on how to use just a slightly different platform. But all things considered, for attorneys who are generally technologically self-sufficient, it's been a pretty easy transition.
Good. What about your clients? What have you heard from them? How have things changed in the way that you interact with them, or needs that they might have from a legal standpoint? What's that been looking like?
I had a handful of clients who really liked coming up to the office for meetings or meeting somewhere. That has obviously died off, and it's become almost all telephone communications. But it's not markedly different. And then we've had some clients who we've had to shift kind of their focus. There's some folks who are landlords who as opposed to going after delinquent tenants, we've now had to work on policies related to COVID and how we structure that so that we can, ultimately protect their rights. Other clients who've been in active litigation, we've had to work with them to understand that things are on hold or to figure out the process to get into the courts when there are urgent issues. And then a lot of businesses who have otherwise had, various types of work, they've kind of stepped up with a mountain of work about how do we manage this process? What are we allowed to do? And questions of that nature. So the work has continued to be there, and clients, seem to be just floating along and utilizing our help, trying to manage their businesses throughout this crisis as well. So it's been a symbiotic relationship.
Well, good. And how about for those in the Bexar County legal community, the courts, your opposing counsel in cases, things like that? How's that gone? And update us on that.
It seems like just about everybody has been very understanding and receptive, and in terms of litigation, has largely put it on hold, except for the things you can do by agreement. So I've seen a great deal of professionalism that's very much appreciated. There are certainly some lawyers who are very court-dependent lawyers for their fees, and I think they're hurting the most. The district courts have done a good job of trying to stay open for business. There's a lot of Zoom hearings, and there's protocols for how you can do most of this electronically. The bankruptcy courts have always entertained telephonic hearings, and so by and large, they're continuing. The federal courts seem to have had the biggest impact and have generally shut down proceedings, except for criminal proceedings. But, everybody's trying to make it work. It's a little slower, but everybody's doing their best to try to make it work.
Have you come across any? I think a lot of people, businesses, and law firms have flocked to Zoom for most of their video conferencing things. Whether it's that or something else, have you found or come across any particular tools or new pieces of technology or software that have been especially helpful during this period?
Well, I have a colleague who loves to use these Zoom meetings, and he's now implementing for just about everything that would otherwise be a phone call. So that has been good. It's really shown people how to use the video conferencing feature. I did a introduction on depositions by Zoom or other video conferencing. I've not actually taken one myself, but I found it very intuitive and easy. And I have a good friend and colleague who's been practicing for in excess of 30 years, who actually did take a deposition by video conference and called me just telling me how great it was and that he would never travel for a deposition again.
Right.
So that, I think that's going to be a huge time and money saver for clients as we all get comfortable with that. The other piece of technology is our technology team had been pushing us to use Microsoft Teams because it was part of our package, our subscription. And we tinkered with it. We never really fully utilized it, but kind of being forced to everybody working from a different location, we really did start to implement it. And it's become a great productivity tool that I'm trying to use in the appropriate environments. Yeah,
let's take another minute, just talk about that. For people that aren't familiar with it, I mean, I think Slack is probably the most well-known of these types of apps or software tools. But now other companies like Microsoft with Teams and a few others have tried to carve into that market. How would you describe it? How are you finding its best use case for a law firm?
The best use of it is, from what I can see, twofold. The first is, as we're all remote, we've set up kind of a standing call where whoever's available can jump on and discuss what's going on, make sure everybody has enough work, ask questions. Since we're not all at the water cooler in the office, it's an opportunity for everybody to get together and just kind of throw ideas out. So that's been a great piece of it. And in fact, I understand that through Microsoft Teams, you can utilize that as your phone server as well. And so you could get rid of, a landline and just have that with you wherever you go.
Yeah.
So that's one big piece of it. The other piece of it was a little bit more difficult to understand because lawyers don't have teams in most cases the way most other organizations do. A lawyer's team might consist of, as odd as it sounds, opposing counsel, outside experts, people within the firm, clients. And so there's a large number of people that you might be collaborating with on any particular project.
Yeah.
You can't put all of those people on one team.
Right. I wouldn't think so.
Right. So it's not intuitive. And within our firm, we have numerous different people assigned to numerous different cases. And so it's hard to say, well, let's have a team for every case. So what I really had to drill down into was, is there a way to use this either on specific, very large cases where you put the team together, and that's been working out very well for us, or do you have teams for different, say, partner-led groups? So it might be that there's 3 associates who work for one partner, but each of them has a different case. But you might just have one team where all of that's kind of put together.
Right.
And it's a discussion place, it's a sharing place.
Yeah.
But it helps to prevent you from getting 1,000 emails a day. And then when you're ready to go catch up on that case, there's one place where you can find all of the information as opposed to trying to search your inbox and hope you found all of the right email.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I'm glad you mentioned it and we get to talk about it. I think we need to probably talk about Teams, Slack, how that relates to email and other types of communication as we move forward a lot deeper and more on this show going forward. But I'm glad that you kind of introduced it here. Thanks again for the original conversation and also for coming back to update us on what's going on with you all right now. And appreciate you taking the time and being with us.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, Ryan. All right, my thanks again to Ryan Reed for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing a couple of things? Number one, would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then secondly, please tell your friends and colleagues in the Texas legal community about the show so we can serve as many of you as possible. If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or as I mentioned earlier, if I could help you in any way with regards to the legal market or lateral hiring or just career advice or counseling, please either email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com, or you can go to varsitysearch.com/lawyer, and you can go right into my calendar and book a time to visit. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk to you next time.